Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Blue Gender Retrospective. This will be the final installation in the character component, and today we will talk about Yuji Kaido, the main character of the story, and his place in it. Now Yuji, as the main protagonist of course, is the one that we tend to spend the most time with, and arguably the character that grows the most. While not all of this growth is consistent or positive at all times, he does genuinely value those around him, except in his berserker state caused by his B cells, and simply seeks to live a quiet life by the end of the series. While his fluctuating growth and development may point to a few writing slip-ups here and there, I think that there's more to this character than that. In fact, I think it points to Yuji being, of all things, human. But of course, before we dive into that, we must first start with his timeline, what he does in the story. Now Yuji is introduced in episode 1 as a sleeper who awakens while being extracted, and is nearly killed by a blue. He is saved by Marlene though, and the frightened Yuji gets upset over essentially having no agency and being forced into such a hellscape. Marlene shuts him up though, and as Yuji witnesses more carnage, he solidifies his will and soon wants to join the fight against the blue. He trains with the group and soon becomes competent, going out of his way to try and help the survivors of both the group and the survivors of humanity in general. In Korea, he even goes out of his way to try and save a small encampment, and this infuriates Marlene, who sees his compassion as a threat to the mission. Yuji does indeed prove himself to be very compassionate, in direct opposition to how cold Marlene is. Unfortunately for him and all the survivors, they can't be saved, and Yuji becomes a tad disillusioned as he has to witness his failure to save this encampment in Korea. Now the only survivor along with Marlene, the two continue on their mission as they trek through the mountains on their way to the Baikonur space base. As they go through the mountains, Yuji actually saves Marlene's life, as she almost falls off of said mountain, and she soon starts to see him as more than a nuisance. His genuine air and his genuine attempts to be helpful and supportive of those around him break down Marlene's cold exterior, and the two's bond starts to form in earnest. While this does see them grow closer, it does not stop Yuji from temporarily running away with some nomadic herders, although his compassion for Marlene and Dice, the best 3-episode character in the whole show by the way, does pull him back, and eventually they do reach Baikonur Space Base safely. Here, they're among the few survivors who actually managed to get the shuttles back up and running and back up to second Earth, although Marlene almost sacrifices herself for the sake of the mission. Yuji once again shows his great compassion though when he risks his own life to save Marlene's, and he even takes a stab wound for her. This sees him rush to the medical station, where some experiments are done and he's kind of out of commission for a few episodes. Eventually though, Marlene does go rogue and meets back up with him, and even wakes him up from his odd slumber. Upon awaking, Yuji is told of his destiny of being in the Sleeper Brigade, and he does join, on the caveat that Marlene be allowed to join him as his partner. Once in the Sleeper Brigade, Yuji forms an odd fixation and or rivalry with Tony, and Marlene starts noticing some odd behaviors in him. Yuji is now much more aggressive, and much less compassionate than he was before, going so far as to abandon and threaten teammates for the sake of destroying the blue. He has developed an unhealthy obsession with the destruction of the blue, and is now much more aggressive in general. Over the course of the 2 drop missions, while he does prove himself to be very effective at fighting the blue, he's also proving himself to be consumed by said fight, and Marlene's concern only grows after Miyagi tells her that he will indeed be consumed by his own rage. On the start of the 2nd drop mission, this seems to prove true, as Yuji goes on to abandon and even threaten his own teammates, as his single-minded rage against the blue drives him to attack basically anyone, including the blue and teammates. This climaxes when he even shoots Marlene, who shows up to try and talk him down. He fully gives into his rage and frustration as he raves about how the blues have ruined his life, and how his lack of agency against them truly frustrates him. He is mad at everything around him, and possibly even himself. Marlene does get through to him though, and Yuji then has a mental stupor of sorts as he settles down from the overwhelming amount of emotion he has built up over the past couple episodes. He immediately regrets his past aggression and soon bounces back in order to help take down Tony. After this, he lives on second Earth for a while with Marlene, lamenting his undefined purpose in life and isolation as a sleeper. Eventually, he does investigate the giant blue nest in South America and learns that the will of the Earth has been done. Knowing this, Yuji emerges to start a new peaceful life with Marlene, and seemingly has discovered that his purpose in life is simply to live. That living is a purpose in and of itself. Now Yuji is a very interesting character to look at, as on the surface his character essentially seems to have 3 different arcs or states of being, if you will, and that while connected, they are different. His initial first arc is a mostly strong showing as he goes from a justifiably scared and bitter young man to a determined and strong fighter. He maintains a strong moral compass throughout this arc, and even instills the importance of empathy to Marlene, as the two help each other survive the rough extraction and even start to fall in love. This arc lasts from about episodes 1 to 14, and it really does set a good foundation for his character. The next arc is about episode 15 to 20, and can be considered the, quote, dark Yuji arc. This is when Yuji's B-cells take over, and he's almost lost forever to his own rage and frustration, although he is saved by Marlene. While this concept is sound and does take the character in new directions, its short duration enforces a quick pace that does make it feel a tad forced and or contrived. Yuji simply becomes a bloodthirsty man a little too quickly for my tastes, especially when we compare the pace of his fall with his relatively steady and consistent growth in the previous arc. However, while this arc does seem a little rushed, and his rivalry with Tony and Tony himself do feel kind of boring and uninteresting, it is still part of his character. Even if it is explained that this is all simply due to his B-cells taking over, I have decided that the Yuji in this arc is still some kind of version of Yuji, and thus will still be factored into upcoming analyses to some extent. It should be noted that while Dark Yuji isn't himself due to his B-cells, the primal rage and fear he manifests still originates from within, it's just amplified. He is still some version of himself. Questionable execution aside, the concept is definitely sound. The final arc is from episode 21 to the conclusion of the series, and sees a more mature version of Arc 1 Yuji take over. He has regained his sense of compassion, although he still feels the driving need to discover his true purpose, which he eventually does do. In fact, this approach to writing his character seems to set up Yuji's character progression in a classic 3-act structure. He enters as a reasonably scared and upset young man who, while confused, does get a lot done and grows confident in his abilities to fix the world. In Act 2, he suffers a setback and is nearly consumed by his own inner rage and frustration, his own flaws. Again, while the massive amplification of these emotions did feel a little rushed, that doesn't change the fact that they came from a genuine place, that they are his. This leads to the emotional climax as the young hero is consumed by his own emotions and must step down for his own good, and is brought back to sanity by his lover. As this resolves and settles down, he again collects himself and continues to move forward into the conclusion. If Yuji is anything, he is an example of a flawed and emotional protagonist. A person with a good moral base and strength of conviction, but with some very noticeable personal weaknesses and hiccups due to his own human nature. In fact, I had to think a while on how to speak of him, since he at times seems all over the place. As noted earlier, he does seem to have 3 different arcs and states of being. I was puzzled at first on how to cover this. At first, I attributed this to simply sloppy writing, although I was unsatisfied with this, as it does seem his character has a good amount of effort placed into it, and sloppy writing alone wouldn't necessarily explain why it goes in all the directions it does. And then I realized, above all, he is human, and is therefore supposed to have several dimensions to him. As humans manifest many emotions, good and bad, Yuji serves as a microcosm of the human experience. While he stumbles a few times, he does for the most part achieve a good deal of growth and help those around him. While he does have some honestly stupid lines, he also says a lot to try and encourage those around him. While he does make some dumb decisions, he doesn't do so out of malice, but usually out of good-natured naivete. While he does lose himself to his emotions on occasion, what human doesn't? He is all over the place at times, and this manifests in many different emotions, because he is human. We can see this with his astonishingly quick transformation from civilian to soldier, and how it contrasts in physical form and emotional form. The physical transformation is easily visible and relatively quick. He puts on body armor, learns how to pilot a mech, and falls in the line with the Sleeper Brigade. It's a clear and linear progression. His emotional one is not, however, as while a soldier from the 2nd or 3rd episode, he never abandons his morality, or his humanity, except during his blind B-cell rage, and even when pressed by the extreme discipline pushed for by the military, he still maintains his own identity. He still wants to help those on Earth, and always tries to save his comrades in arms, even if that goes against military codes, even if military codes frown upon this. This emotional aspect of Yuji is both his best and worst trait. On one hand, he is compassionate and confident enough to stick to what he believes, and since he has a decent moral compass most of the time, this means that he isn't afraid to defy questionable codes or orders to save those around him, and he even humanizes those that he serves with. We can see this especially in the case of Marlene. He puts himself at risk constantly to try and save those around him, and essentially teaches Marlene how to be human again. When Yuji acts on good intentions and good emotions, like compassion and respect, a lot of good can and does come from him. However, as positive emotions can lead to positive outcomes, negative ones can foster negative ones as well, and we see this in his many cruel actions when he's consumed by his rage. He almost kills Marlene after all, and if Yuji's character shows anything, it's that emotions can cause a great deal of irrational responses, for both better and worse. Very often, good can beget good, and bad can beget bad. It also means that Yuji tends to make impulsive decisions and judgments without necessarily weighing all of the consequences of his actions. He knows not to act upon his emotions as soon as he feels them, although he does so anyways a good amount of the time. While his altruism can show the positive effects of emoting, his hampered judgment, and arguably the entirety of his second character arc, can show its many drawbacks. Yuji shows that very often humans are emotional creatures, and this can lead to many things, good and bad. He proves that while having no compassion or emotions is bad for humanity and very self-destructive, being consumed by emotions is just as bad as having none. In order to take advantage of both humanity's ability to learn and ability to feel, a balance between the two must be struck. Where Marlene must balance learning how to feel with cold rationale, Yuji must rationalize toning down emotions at times in order to remain rational. He is extremely human, and this makes for someone who, while trying to do the right thing, doesn't always pull it off optimally. One of the points of his character is that he isn't perfect, that he isn't always likable, that he isn't always consistent. But he is always human. He is human above all, and he does usually get the job done, and this is in no small part due to his relationship with Marlene. This relationship is very important to both characters, and does benefit them both, as they are strong where the other is weak. Yuji helps Marlene learn to feel again, as she has over time become extremely cold and borderline unpleasant. Meanwhile, Marlene keeps Yuji grounded, serving as both a logical thinker and emotional tether for him. This grounding does a good deal in keeping Yuji from getting too impulsive, and their bond is strong enough to even overcome the bloodlust of the B-cells, and bring back Yuji's more human traits. While Marlene arguably saves Yuji more, she never would have been able to save herself or him if he hadn't taught her how to feel again. Another human trait Yuji expresses, and a kind of a running plot point for him, is finding his purpose. Like most people at some point in their life, Yuji is confounded as to what his purpose in life is, and this distresses him quite a bit at times. As such, he seeks a point to his life, and Yuji serves as a good example of a character who is haunted by this task, although he eventually does find it. At first, having just been awoken in this hellscape, Yuji thinks that there is no point to life, and then that he must get out alive in order to find the point of life. This is the reaction of someone in both great shock and despair at having lost everything he once had and knew. Up until this point, living is seen as simply a means to an undiscovered end. He soon grows out of this though, and he next thinks that his purpose is to fight the Blue. After all, the military command tells him that he's destined to do this, and he seems pretty good at it. This new purpose gives Yuji hope, and something to work towards, as he now sees a reason for being. This doesn't pan out either though, as he's almost consumed by his B-cells, and even if that wasn't the case, he realizes that he couldn't win on his own anyways. Once again, he is lost, and is saddened by seemingly lacking a raison d'etre. He is frustrated by his lack of agency. Finally, with the end of the war and the Blue, he realizes what his real purpose is. In the end, his real purpose was simply to go on living, and to be human. His quest for purpose goes full circle, initially merely living to find a purpose, then being assigned a false purpose of killing the Blue, and finally realizing that living was his true purpose all along. All in all, Yuji's character is a surprisingly interesting and deep one that I will admit I sort of missed the point of at first. He is fascinating not only for his development, but how scattered it is at times. He goes through many ups and downs, and makes some questionable decisions, although he usually seems to rebound. He shows both the strengths and weaknesses of being emotional, and how one must balance emotion with reason. Sometimes he's very likable, sometimes he's very unlikable. He both humanizes and dehumanizes others, at times, and he isn't always consistent, and he isn't always rational. But this isn't because he's written poorly, but instead, because he's written to be human.